Welcome back into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, part number 2 of week number 1, kickoff to college football. Week 1 is here with our two-hole hitter, Matt Josephs, at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter. Mid-Major Matt, welcome into the pod. How you feeling, buddy?
Feeling good. The two-hole hitter just has to make some contact, maybe try and move the runners over and have some success if they don't get an actual hit. So that's what we're going to try and do on this podcast.
Absolutely. A lot of times the argument is you put your best hitter in the two-hole. I don't know with the whole like new metrics and lineup. It's definitely towards the top though, either 1, 2, or 3. So hey, that's what we think of Mid-Major Matt. Guys, find him. ESPN Richmond is where you can check him out. He's got the show 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, right? Eastern time, Matt?
Yep, and doing a lot of previews this week on the Virginia schools and talking a lot about the matchups, and we have a couple of them in our little piece here. So we'll certainly get into the Hokies and the Monarchs, and I believe UVA's in this little area too.
Absolutely. And also check him out, sportsmemo.com for his premium client plays. We got 171-172 to start off at the top of the card, 2 o'clock Eastern time. And guys, if I didn't say it, it's 171-172, the rotation number, down to 204 UMass and Auburn. That is for part number 2 before we bring in Robbie Vino. But here, top of the games we'll be talking about, Akron and Temple, Matt. It's 56-57 being the total, depending on where you're shopping. And Temple, minus 10 point, listed as the home team favorites. So the Akron Zips visiting Temple. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, and I'm guessing one of the groups must have hit the over because it went up a couple points on either Tuesday or I think on Tuesday it went up a couple points. So obviously some of the sharps out there like the over. I think some people kind of look at this line and they're like, Temple, a double-digit favorite. That doesn't happen very often. And the irony is it actually happened last year. Last year, they were a 10-point favorite over UMass and won that game 28-0. So they did cover last time. And look, when you talk about Temple, you talk about E.J. Warner, who I think is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in America. He's Kurt Warner's son. He took over midway through the season about when DeJuan Mathis struggled under center for Temple. And he's got a lot of good weapons, including some guys that came over transfer-wise. Dante Wright from Colorado State. I think Temple's defense is going to be the question mark. And actually, it's both lines, both the offensive line and the defensive line. I don't think either of them will be an issue in this one. When you look at Akron, 15 starters back, 8 of them on offense, 7 of them on defense. I really do like DJ Irons. We've tried several times last year to play Akron because that offense has a little bit of tenacity to it. They're going to make people work a little bit, but I think Temple wins this game. I really do. I like what the Owls are doing. I think the Owls are kind of a sleeper team when it comes to the AAC. I don't think they're going to win the conference, certainly, but I think they're going to spring an upset and help somebody move up in those standings. I think that begins here. Temple wins this game against Akron. The over probably was the play. You're not getting the best number now, obviously, if you play it, but I do see some points being put up by both of these teams in this one.
From one MAC team taking a step up in class to another here. Northern Illinois at Boston College, game number 2, 12 noon Eastern kick. 51 being the total. Looks like BC minus 8.5 point favorites. I say it's taking a step up in class, Matt. To tell you the truth, Boston College, man, this program, I don't know. Can they bounce back? What are you thinking here, Northern Illinois, Boston College?
So I think we're actually getting Northern Illinois here at a decent price. Now, look, their defense is not great. But I think if everybody looks at last year's Northern Illinois season, they see the poor record, they're like, this team's probably not very good. But injuries just destroyed their season last year. They lost Rocky Lombardi. They lost a lot of key pieces on that offense and some of the guys on the defense. And it kind of warned them a little bit towards the end of the season. And so I think we're getting Northern Illinois at not a bad price here. 15 returning starters, plenty on both sides of the ball. And as I said, Rocky Lombardi is their quarterback. One of the other notes that's interesting, 24-9 against the spread as a road underdog the last 10 seasons. So Northern Illinois has been a profitable bet as an underdog. Now, look, they are taking a step up and playing an ACC school, but Boston College is nothing special. Emmett Moorhead's going to be the starting quarterback. Zay Flowers has disappeared here. He went to the pros. He's going to do good things for the Baltimore Ravens. But stepping in as the number 1 wide receiver is Ryan O'Keefe, the number 1 at UCF. Don't know, Drew, why he would leave UCF and go to Boston College, but who knows? That's the decision he made. Slightly into Northern Illinois here. I think we're getting a good price here on a team that I know will be competitive. And I think the back door is open with this type of team. I think their offense can get us that late score if they're down 14 or 15 late. So I kind of lean towards Northern Illinois here.
Next game up 175, 176, 8 o'clock Eastern on Saturday. Little brother, big brother feel. At least that's how I view it. But it's right you're in your neck of the woods, Matt. So you can speak to that a little bit more than me. It's ODU at Virginia Tech. That's Old Dominion at Virginia Tech. 47.5 being the total. Looks like minus 16. That's the Hokies in Blacksburg.
Yeah, and this one means a whole lot more. Obviously, last year was a very disappointing effort down in Norfolk when Virginia Tech lost 20-17 on the road in that game, and they looked bad. And their secondary was embarrassed a little bit by this guy Ali Jennings for Old Dominion. Well, Virginia Tech went and took Ali Jennings and brought him over to their campus. So he's on the other side of this rivalry for this one. I think he's going to make a large difference for Grant Wells. Last year, Grant Wells was terrible. I think part of it was the offensive line struggled at times. I think part of it was they didn't have a legit person to throw to in terms of a number one. Virginia Tech's got a number one. They got a number 2 and a number 3 wide receiver. So I think their offense is going to be a whole lot better in this one. Their defense, the front seven is the question mark for Virginia Tech's defense because they lost some key pieces. Dax Hollyfield was the heartbeat of that defense. He's gone. But their secondary is going to be so good this coming season. You look on the other side, you've got an ODU team that has just 7 starters back, 4 on offense, 3 on defense. Their starting quarterback is going to be the Fordham transfer, Grant Wilson, who threw 13 passes for the Rams. Now, the key here is the offensive coordinator also comes over from Fordham. They're going to run a fast-paced style of offense here. I don't know how good it's going to be, but it's going to go fast, that's for sure. One of the 3 returnees on defense is Jason Henderson, who led the FBS in tackles last year, had over 180 tackles, which is crazy in a 12-game season. I'll tell you this, I kind of lean towards Virginia Tech's under when it comes to their team total, 31.5. Virginia Tech's not going to want to go as fast as I think. Old Dominion may put up a little bit of points here, but this is a lot of points for Virginia Tech to score here. I know they want to embarrass ODU. I know they want to win this game really badly, but 31.5 seems a little bit high. It's, of course, a key number. You get that nice, neat 4 touchdowns and a field goal, and that gives you 31 points. Kind of lean to under 31.5 points here to Virginia Tech in this game.
Great breakdown, Matt. I mean, you bring up a lot. There's kind of a lot of parts to this handicap. You get the player, ODU, Ali Jennings going to Virginia Tech. You get the new OC at ODU as well. I can see why, I guess one question for you. You brought up it means a lot in the game last year, but how I introduced it, is there like kind of a little bit of a rivalry? I mean, these two teams aren't too far apart, right?
I don't know if there's necessarily a rivalry, although Old Dominion continuing to beat Virginia Tech. They beat them 2 of the last 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, those games were in Norfolk, and then they flipped to Blacksburg, I believe, in 2020, and Virginia Tech won that game rather easily. So, I mean, it's for recruiting battles, but once again, like Virginia Tech's kind of going for the higher 7.57 kids, whereas ODU may try to get those higher 7.57 kids and probably not get them. The other factor here to consider is it's an 8 o'clock kickoff. We know how Blacksburg is at night. You should get a full crowd there. Enter Sandman. The building's going to be rocking. I believe it's on the ACC network. So there's a lot of things surrounding it. And it's a large game for the state recruits. So I think Virginia Tech wants to put their best foot forward here. That's why I think they're a hefty favorite. But I don't believe in their offense yet. I got to see it to believe it. So I think maybe Virginia Tech goes under that 31.5 point team total.
Next game up, 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We're heading to Lexington as Ball State visits Kentucky. Looks like 49.5 being the total. The Wildcats, minus 26.5 point home favorites. Gotta love the MAC versus the SEC here.
Yeah, these matchups are always interesting. We'll start with the MAC side of things. Ball State brings back 14 starters, 7 on each side of the ball. Their quarterback is going to be Lane Hatcher, who's been in like 15 different places in college football. I feel like A, he's been there for 15 years, and B, he's just somewhere else every year. Not a bad quarterback, not a great quarterback. They also plucked Marquez Cooper from Kent State for their running back group, and that's part of the reason why Kent State's going to be one of the worst teams in the country. So the offense might be able to produce some points here, but you look at this team, all 4 starters from last year in the secondary are gone. They had a pretty good secondary. Their team total's 10.5 points. I've seen some people say they like the over when it comes to this game. Kentucky has 15 starters back, 10 on offense. That's huge. One of the guys they lost is Will Levis. He's in the NFL now, but you can argue Devin Leary's a step up. Devin Leary is a little bit more mobile. You also get, a pretty good running back in Ray Davis from Vanderbilt, who also played at Temple. He replaces Chris Rodriguez. So I think Kentucky's going to do a lot of the scoring in this game. So if you do like Kentucky, maybe you look at the over for their team total, 37.5. It's one of those things where if you do like the over, you're going to hope for 13 points from Ball State, maybe 14 points. I don't know if their offense is going to do that. The number's 10.5. So if you like the over, maybe just isolate Kentucky here if you think that they're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for an over anyway.
Matt, we got a big game up next here. The battle for the Carolinas, 7:30 Eastern time, primetime kickoff, North Carolina and South Carolina. Neutral site here, Bank of America Stadium, 65 being the total, -2 in the hook. That's UNC as the quote-unquote road favorite, but I believe this is where the Panthers play, the Carolina Panthers at NFL Stadium, Bank of America Stadium, ACC, SEC. Like this game, I'm looking forward to it, Matt. What are you thinking, UNC at South Carolina?
I lean to the over here. Both teams, I think, have some matchups that they can take advantage of. You look at South Carolina. If you do DFS or if you do props, I'd be looking at Spencer Rattler and Antoine Wells props because I think they'll both be busy early and often. Spencer Rattler was good last year for South Carolina. He's going to get better. 6 starters back on offense, 4 starters back on defense. The defense has only 4 of their top 11 tacklers back. So South Carolina's defense is going to be a little bit of a problem in this game. And then you look on the other side, North Carolina has 17 starters back. And they've got Drake May, who's going to try for the Heisman. I don't think he's going to win the Heisman. The thing for Drake May is he's going to be without 2 of his receivers from last year. He doesn't get Tez Walker from Kent State. They were hoping to bring him in, but the NCAA would not approve a waiver there, which was really ridiculous. The guy wanted to come close to home, play for his grandmother. The NCAA wouldn't allow it. So it'll be interesting, at least early on, does Drake May have good chemistry with some new wide receivers here? The other thing that helps out the over is 1 starter back in the secondary. They do pick up a couple of transfers, Armani Chapman from Virginia Tech and Antavius Lane from Georgia State, but it just feels like here both teams can find some success through the air against the other one. Maybe if you do have some props, maybe take the over on Drake May's touchdown passes, Spencer Rattler's touchdown passes. I think there should be some fireworks here, slightly into South Carolina here, Drew, but I kind of lean more towards the over.
We got MAC Big Ten up next, Matt, 3:30 Eastern Saturday, 181, 182 as we're going down in rotation order. Buffalo at Wisconsin, 54 being the total. -28. That's the Badgers in Camp Randall. You think they could jump around enough to cover the 4 touchdowns?
So here's the thing that I think people need to realize now, because if you aren't paying attention, Wisconsin's got a new offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, who comes over from North Carolina. They're not going to be slow anymore. They're not going to be boring anymore. They're not going to give it to Braylon Allen 30 times a game. Most likely, they're going to progress into the 2000s when it comes to their offenses. They're going to actually become a modern-day offense, and they got Tanner Mordecai at quarterback, who I really like. I think Tanner Mordecai is going to fit this new system here. So you've got a Wisconsin team that I think is going to do some scoring. Buffalo's got 10 starters back, 5 on both sides of the ball. Cole Snyder, Ron Cook, that's their 2 weapons on offense. The thing to consider here, when you look at this matchup, and why, if you're going to make a play on Wisconsin, maybe you isolate the first half or maybe try and get out of something in the fourth quarter. Next week, they've got Wazoo on the road. Wazoo went into Madison last year and beat them. You know that this team is going to have some revenge on their mind. Not saying they're going to look ahead. They're not going to lose to Buffalo. But if you're taking the Wisconsin full game spread here, I'd be, just in case you see what that spread is at the third quarter, they might start taking guys out in the fourth quarter if it's too big. Then that means that Buffalo might come and backdoor this whole thing. So just something to consider here, much like USC and much like some of these other ones where you kind of think that the team might only play their starters for 3 quarters. You don't want to be stuck in the fourth quarter with a large favorite that's got their third stringers in there, their second stringers in there, because they've got a better game coming up next week.
Good point. Yeah, the look-ahead spot might be in effect, and covering the big number becomes a question as we got Utah State and Iowa up next, Matt. 43 being the total. I'm seeing Iowa -23-point favorites, so more than half of the total Iowa is laying in Iowa City, Matt.
Yeah, this total's dropping because it's widely considered that Cade McNamara is not going to play. I don't think it's come out yet, but I think it's kind of been the rumblings among the people, the sharps and things like that, which means they most likely will be going to their second or third string quarterback who has nowhere near the experience of a Cade McNamara. And then we kind of go back to what Iowa games used to be: field position, running the ball, throwing it sporadically, and things like that. And obviously, we're tracking, what is it, Drew? The points. Remember this offseason, they set a certain point total or a point average for the offensive coordinator that he has to hit. So we're certainly on that kind of watch.
Oh, yeah.
You look at Utah State. I mean, I'm not a big Cooper Legas guy at quarterback. I don't even know if I said his name right. Their defense was actually not going to be bad, but then they lost three players right after the spring. So that kind of takes away from it. They only have 9 starters back total. I would have been interested in some sort of team total in this game. It was 33.5 for Iowa, which would have been insane. It's obviously probably gone down. I didn't look and see what the new number is, but since the totals come down, this number is probably coming down. So this would be only an under or pass. I just, with a quarterback that's a backup quarterback for Iowa against a team who I don't expect to score very much, this might actually be, Drew, a first quarter under or a first half under, because I just don't expect a lot from the Iowa State side of things. The Utah State side of things. And, oh, yeah, by the way, the Iowa State game's next week. Iowa has done a better job of taking care of business before that game than Iowa State has, but that's always something to keep in the back of your mind is, what is it? The Cy-Hawk Trophy is on the line next week.
Cy-Hawk, yeah, that's the trophy. Is that your favorite rivalry name, Matt? Cy-Hawk?
No, there's probably other ones, but that's just one of the ones I remember. It's obviously very creative, going off the Cyclones and the Hawkeyes, but yeah, it's an interesting trophy, that's for sure.
For sure. What we got, the bucket one. There's a couple good ones out there.
I think the wooden bucket or the old oaken bucket, I think, is one of them.
Bucket. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that one's a great one. That's one of my favorites as well. Guys, let us know below. At Mid-Major Matt, at Drew Martin Betts on Twitter and YouTube as well. Which one's your favorite rivalry name? As we got the Cy-Hawk Trophy coming up next week. We got a few more games here for part number 2. Then we'll bring in Robbie Vino. We had Jeff Nadeau in part number 1. This is the Every Game on the Board podcast, college football. You guessed it, talking every single game on the board. Matt Joseph's here, our 2-hole hitter. ESPN Richmond's where you can catch them 3:00 Eastern time during the week, and sportsmemo.com as well. And we are brought to you by Viva Tequila Seltzer. VivaTequilaSeltzer.com is where you can go to check it out, guys. If you haven't tried it, you need to. Flavors pair perfectly with their artisanal Blanco tequila for subtle and refreshing drinks. VivaTequilaSeltzer.com. We got Toledo and Illinois up next, 185-186, 7:30 Eastern. 46 being the total, Matt, -9 in the hook. That's the Illini in Champaign.
Yeah, this is an interesting one as well. I mean, look, it's a Toledo team that everybody probably thinks is going to win the MAC. And for good reason. 16 starters back, almost all the key players on offense, a lot of the great players on defense. They have a kind of a sneaky good secondary. The question that's going to be for some of the gamblers is, are you going to get the team that lost 77-21 to Ohio State, which is, Ohio State and Illinois are not the same other than the conference, or are you getting the team that lost that won 17-14 over they lost 17-14 to San Diego State last year. Close game, low scoring, things like that. I would say Illinois projects more closer to a San Diego State than an Ohio State. You've got 8 of the top 11 tacklers back against for Toledo, and you've got a team who's not going to be intimidated by Illinois. Illinois lost their defensive coordinator in the offseason. I think that's going to hurt them a little bit. Only 12 starters back, 6 on each side. I'm not a big Luke Altmaier fan. He transfers over from Ole Miss. And as I said, the defensive coordinator being out here, I think Toledo's live. This could almost be one of those things where you play a little bit, half a unit on the spread, and maybe sprinkle a little bit on the money line. Toledo could be the type of team that goes into Illinois and wins. I'm just not a fan of the Illini. I am on their under 6.5 for the win total this season, but Toledo's very live in this matchup.
Matt taking a shot here. Can get it flirting with plus 300, guys. Risk 100 to win 300 if the Rockets go in and shock Illinois here. Matt, next game up, Colorado and TCU. Early kick here, 12 noon Eastern. I'm thinking that's 11 a.m. local time. 64-63, depending where you're shopping, being the total, and TCU laying just under 3 touchdowns, -20.5. One of the more intriguing handicaps of week one college football. We get Colorado turning over their roster pretty much. We get TCU, in the national championship game, yet people thinking they're going to take a step back. That's always kind of a tricky handicap in itself. What are you looking to do with the Buffs and the Horned Frogs here?
I mean, this is a game that I can't play, and because as you just mentioned, Colorado took essentially their whole roster and threw it in the garbage and brought in like 60 or 70 kids of their own. I mean, look, Deion Sanders obviously thinks he knows what he's doing here. I'm not one to say whether he does or he doesn't. I mean, this could be perfect, and we see more kids, more schools doing this where they basically shuffle whole rosters in and out. The talent's there. I mean, Shedeur Sanders, I think, is a solid quarterback. Travis Hunter, obviously, is going to be an offensive weapon that I think they're going to use. They've got a lot of guys that they picked up from other places. It's just, can they gel together? Can they make it work? I mean, obviously Deion made it work at Jackson State, but this is a whole new ball game. And then you got a TCU team that has only 3 starters back on offense. Chandler Morris is their quarterback. Their defense may have to carry them a little bit early, but how's their defense going to do against a team where how do you scout something like this? How do you scout? You probably go back, you watch Jackson State film, and then what? You got to watch some of these other players film. What does this guy do and this guy? And so it's a tough handicap for TCU. To me, Drew, it's either you have to have a really good conviction in this game and play something, because it's going to be the best Colorado number you're going to get all season, because the odds makers know as little as we do about this game, or you just kind of stay away and kind of put it in the back of your mind for week 2, week 3, week 4, so on and so forth for Colorado.
Matt, let me give my analysis on this, because I want to get your opinion. We get Sean Lewis coming in as the OC for Colorado. He was at Kent State, really fast tempo. And then we get Kendall Briles, the OC for TCU now, the new OC, another top 20 offense in terms of seconds per snap. I think that both of these two teams are going to look to go fast. And TCU, yeah, they lose their quarterback, Max Duggan. But if you remember last year, Chandler Morris actually beat him out for the job. So I'm not so sure how far of a drop-off we're going to get from Max Duggan, who I do think was a good college quarterback. And you talked about Deion Sanders' son at the quarterback position. The difference in caliber of athlete looks to be a lot higher this year for Colorado. Seeing the total of 63 low watermark, I like it to the over, Colorado and TCU. Could you see a lot of points scored?
I think we'll see a lot of possessions. I think that's the thing that helps your over. The problem is, are they going to be successful possessions? I mean, you're going to need a lot of touchdowns. You're not going to have a lot of time-consuming drives here, I don't think. I think both teams, I mean, that's the one thing you're kind of banking on, Drew. And when you look at it over, you either want to play 2 prolific offenses who are going to be efficient when they have the ball and they're going to score touchdowns, or you want a lot of bites at the apple. That's the thing. And I think you're going to get a lot of bites because both of these teams are going to have a lot of possessions. The question is, Drew, if they're just going 3 and out and punting the ball back and forth to each other, that doesn't help as much. I do like, if I was to play any side on this thing in terms of the total, it would be the over. But I'm just worried about some inefficiency early. Can you get a better number in game, Drew, if there's a couple of 3 and outs early, and then you kind of see that they're starting to figure each other out a little bit, and maybe some points come after the first quarter or the second quarter?
And just a quick follow-up here. I'm trying to ask all the handicappers, get their opinion. Do you think the clock rules, not stopping the first down until the 2-minute mark of each half, do you think it's having a big impact? How are you kind of bringing that into your handicap?
So I think it's funny. Everybody points to the Notre Dame Navy game as like this thing that for last week, they're like, oh, look at the Notre Dame Navy game. We had less plays, but you have 2 running-based teams. You had Notre Dame who wants to run the ball a lot, and you have Navy who wants to run the ball a lot. So, of course, it's going to be a difference there. I don't think so, Drew, because I think the fast teams are going to be fast. In the games where the tempo is going to be up, I don't think that it's going to matter too much. You're still going to lose a play or 2, yes. But I think it matters more for the academies. I think it matters more for the old Minnesota before they made their coordinator change, when they just used to run the ball with Ibrahim. I think the run-based teams, it's going to be more beneficial. I think the teams that go fast, it's not going to matter.
Like it at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter, Matt Josephs. We got Sam Houston State BYU up next, the nightcap on Saturday, 10:15 Eastern time, 46.5 being the total, Matt. And we're seeing -19 in the hook, -20. That's the Cougars in Provo.
Sam Houston State hoping for the same thing that happened with JMU last year and Jacksonville State this year, that their first FBS game is going to produce a victory. It will not, most likely. They have a very tough opponent early on with BYU. We'll start with the Bearcats. 16 starters back. Drew, they did a really interesting thing last year. Casey Keeler redshirted a lot of key players because last year was a dead season. They were not making the FCS playoffs. They basically were just trying to run out the string as a member of the FCS. And Casey Keeler went to some players and said, do you want a red shirt and play next year when the games matter? And so some of the numbers that we saw last year when it comes to Sam Houston State aren't as accurate as they would be this year. The problem is their offense was terrible last year. They played one FBS opponent last year. They lost 31-0 to Texas A&M. So you take a little bit from that. Texas A&M's offense last year wasn't great. Obviously, their defense was great. I don't expect a lot of Sam Houston State early on. I think their offense is a little bit underwhelming. The team total's 13.5. I'm hoping maybe it flips to 14.5 and we can get that. I don't think it will. I just don't think Sam Houston State's going to score a lot. On the BYU side, 15 starters back. Keaton Slovis, who I feel once again has been on like 15 programs, Drew.
Yeah.
He's back. And Aiden Robbins, you're familiar with Aiden Robbins, obviously the UNLV running back. He's back. And they've got a new defensive coordinator at BYU because BYU's defense was terrible last year. I think this is a name your score situation for BYU. I think that they're just going to be able to do whatever they want here. It's different to go from FCS and FBS and play a UTEP and play a Middle Tennessee, which JMU did last year. Now you're playing a BYU team who's bigger, is probably older than you in a lot of different places. It's not an easy start for the Bearcats, and I think BYU is going to take care of business in this one.
Matt, primetime Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern, Texas Tech at Wyoming. Good matchup here. -14. That's the Red Raiders as the road favorite. 50.5 being the total. I've heard a lot of people liking this Texas Tech team coming into the season. Looks like the market does as well. 2 touchdown road favorites. And Laramie, which depending who you ask, a lot of people say it's a tough place to play. Highest elevation Division I home field. What are we thinking Texas Tech and Wyoming?
So there's a bunch of things to consider here, Drew. Obviously, with this being a week 1 game, Texas Tech can get to Laramie whenever they want. I mean, they could have been there. They could have gone last week and gotten used to the altitude. If this was a week 5 game, the handicap is a little bit different because you can't get out there early. The earliest you could get out there is probably Wednesday or Thursday. So I don't know yet. I mean, I haven't read exactly if they're there yet or when they got there. Will they get there by then? But it would behoove them if they would be there by now as we do this thing on a Wednesday so they can get used to it. Situationally, I hate it for Texas Tech. You've got a Wyoming team that has some question marks. I don't like Andrew Peasley as the quarterback. I just don't think he's great. He does some things okay, but I mean, I've never backed Wyoming because of him. 9 of their top 10 tacklers are back. It was a disappointing defense last year, but we know what Wyoming and Craig Bowl always wants to do. They want to be physical on defense. They want to run the ball, and they want to play to a style that benefits them in that altitude. They're 6-2 ATS the last 4 seasons as a home underdog. It doesn't happen very often. And then the other reason why I kind of like it, once again, situationally, is Texas Tech is hosting Oregon next week. And I don't know necessarily, look, they're going to play hard for the first 3 quarters, 4 quarters, whatever it is. But towards the end of the game, Drew, I wonder if it's in the back of their minds that they have a better game coming up next week. And the other question for Texas Tech's whole season is, can Tyler Shaw stay healthy all year long? Donovan Smith's not there anymore. He's in Houston. So they don't have necessarily the comforting backup quarterback that they've always had there. So I like Texas Tech. I think they're going to be good as long as they stay healthy. This spot is miserable. Try and find out when Texas Tech went out to Laramie. I think that will neutralize some of it in terms of how much it happens during a game. But I would lean Wyoming here just a slight little bit because I do think they're live as a 2-touchdown dog in this one.
I don't disagree with you, Matt. Just a question on the week 1 home field advantage. Do you think it's kind of I guess, not as strong in week 1 college football as it would be on a normal week, just across the board?
So I would say no. I don't, Drew. I actually think for bad teams, when you're 0-0 and there's excitement for your football season, I think you're going to have some of your better crowds. Now, if this is once again week 7 or 8, and Wyoming's 1-6, probably not. There'll be a lot of Texas Tech fans. I think there'll be a lot of Texas Tech fans there anyway. But week 1, Drew, everybody's got that hope. Everybody's got that enthusiasm for the season. So I think it'll be one of Wyoming's best outside of their rivalry games and stuff like that. So no, I think there will be some home field advantage. But once again, it gets negated if you're out there on a Tuesday or Wednesday and, taking care of that altitude stuff early if you're Texas Tech.
I'm seeing the Red Raiders rode to Wyoming for the season opener yesterday.
Okay, that's plenty of time.
I'll try to confirm it. That's just a headline, guys, as we'll move down here. 193, 194. Washington State, Colorado State. Seeing the Cougars minus 11-point road favorites. 54.5 being the total. Wazoo versus Colorado State.
So here's the thing. I watched Colorado State last year. They were frequently on my card for their team total unders. They never scored more than 20 points all season last year. Now, it was year 1 in a new system, and the quarterback play wasn't great. Their defense kept them in ball games, but the problem was that the 3-and-outs kept wearing on them, and then they were on the field so much that it almost hurt them towards the end of games. I've talked to a lot of sharps who absolutely love Colorado State this year, love their win total over, love everything about them. I don't share the same optimism for Colorado State. It's more one of those things where I have to see it to believe it. I have to see their offense play well before everybody just assumes that it will. Torrey Horton, one of the best wide receivers in America that I think people don't really talk about, but I got to see it from Colorado State first. Now, here's the thing. This is a good situational spot, and this line's come down a lot, and I've already seen people, screaming CLV champions because we got this number at a great number. Washington State has 12 starters back. I love Cameron Ward. You and I have talked about Incarnate Word when he was there, and we talked about it last year. I'm sure Washington State came up at least once. I love Cameron Ward. I think he's a great quarterback. He had a very good year in that system for Washington State. Once again, for them, the question mark is they get Wisconsin at home next week. Now, obviously, they won at Madison, but it's always, a Power 5 school playing another Power 5 school, especially at home. It's a big game for them. I wonder if Colorado State can backdoor them towards the end and maybe help some of those CLV champions out with regards to whatever number they got this at. I can't bet Colorado State here because I need to see the improvement after watching them be so bad last year. But a lot of people think that they're going to be really good this season and that they are a play to make here in week 1.
We got Mountain West Pac-12 again, Matt, as Nevada and USC face off in the Coliseum. 66.5 being the total. We're seeing the Trojans, another big favorite off of the San Jose State victory, laying 38 points here as the home favorite hosting Nevada, Matt.
Yeah, USC won 56-28 in their first game. Caleb Williams had 4 touchdowns. They only played 3 quarters in that game. They've got their conference opener next. They're hosting Stanford next. So once again, Drew, this will be one of those situations where if they're up healthy enough margin in the third quarter, Caleb Williams is probably going to come out. Now, the difference is their second-string quarterback probably still better than Nevada's starting quarterback here. I think it's a 5-star or 4-star freshman that they really like down in USC. Over in USC, you've got Nevada, who's got 14 starters back. Their top 3 tacklers are gone. They named Brendan Lewis their starting quarterback here. Look, Drew, if you're going to play anything with regards to USC, you got to play it in the first half. You got to play it in the first quarter. I would say almost the first quarter, team total, first quarter spread, whatever, is a good thing because they obviously have a game under their belt. And you can watch, if you're Nevada, you can watch the film of that game and be ready for everything, but you can't match the speed that USC puts out there. So I would not want to hold a ticket with USC minus 38 in the fourth quarter with backups of a defense that's already not great. I understand that Nevada is not as good as San Jose State, but San Jose State, I think they covered last week, right, Drew? San Jose State covered the number against USC because it was like 31, I think, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So you do not want to have a ticket of USC minus 38 in the fourth quarter with backups going up against Nevada's potential starters here. So if you're isolating USC, which you should be, look for a first quarter, first half type play, or maybe even if your book offers it, and I don't think a lot of books do, maybe a third through 3 quarters type of play, because I think once again, we could be seeing backups and backups in the fourth quarter.
Have you seen that bet through 3 quarters?
Probably not, but I mean, some books offer a lot of different things, Drew. I'm not gonna say that they couldn't offer something like that.
Oh yeah, you click around on some of these and you find something new if you click around enough, guys. Mountain West at Pac-12 portion of the podcast here as we got another one, Boise State and Washington. Speaking of teams that the market's liking. The Washington Huskies, one of them as well. -14, -14.5 at some shops, 59 being the total.
Well, this is the start of my Heisman campaign for Taylor Green. I put $1 down, Drew, on 500 to 1 for Taylor Green to win the Heisman. I know it's not going to happen, but I like Taylor Green and I like his weapons. And if he shows up in this first game, he at least gets put into the radar, let's say. I mean, obviously, look, it's not going to win. I'm telling you now. The only reason you want to join me on this is because you want to have some fun. It's 500 to 1. It's probably not going to win. But this would be a good opportunity, Drew, because a lot of people are going to watch. And Washington is going to score some points. And if Boise State wants to keep up, Taylor Green is going to have to play a good game. Now, he loses Latrell Caples, the wide receiver, for the season. But most of the other skill position guys are back. So I think Boise State's going to score some points here. Problem is their defense is going to be a problem. Their secondary is going to be a problem. Michael Penix Jr., probably the more realistic sleeper of the two of them when it comes to the Heisman here. He's got all of his weapons back. McMillan's back. Polk Jr.'s back. Rome is back. I don't want to try and butcher his last name. Rome O, he is also back. So, Washington's going to score a lot of points. Their defense is going to be a little bit leaky too, Drew. I would say if I was to play anything in this game, it would be the over here. I just think we're going to see some fun. Both teams got quarterbacks who I think can put up some points. Both defenses are a little leaky towards the secondary here. I would lean towards the over.
We got Sunbelt at Pac-12 up next here, 199-200, another nightcap, 10:30 Eastern kick. Coastal Carolina at UCLA, -14.5, 2 touchdown favorites, plus the hook here. That's the Bruins in the Rose Bowl, 66 being the total as the Chanticleers go cross country here, Matt. What are you thinking in Los Angeles?
And once again, this would be a worry for me in the middle of the season. I don't know when Coastal Carolina is out in California. Not that it really matters. It's not like there's an altitude issue. There's just a time difference. And I'm guessing a lot of these kids probably have been in the West Coast, so they'll be okay with it. Kind of an interesting offseason for Coastal Carolina. They lose Jamie Chadwell to Liberty, but Grayson McCall decides to come back. There was time in the offseason where everybody said, man, Grayson McCall is going to transfer to somewhere. We're not going to have him back. He comes back. He's got a lot of his skill position guys. I think Coastal could score some points here. My worry is that UCLA has 9 starters back on defense, but I think Coastal will be able to do some things. Tim Beck, who was the OC at NC State, I think he's going to draw up some creative stuff for Grayson McCall, and I think he's going to have a solid game here. The question is for UCLA, Drew, and I know you probably saw this. So they have a lot of starters back, and they named the starting quarterback. It's the Garbers kid. But Chip Kelly also said that Colin Schlee from Kent State and Dante Moore, the 5-star freshman, are both going to play a quarterback. How are we doing 3 quarterbacks playing in every game? Now, I don't know if that was one of those things where he says that, but he's not actually going to follow through with it. But you know the catchphrase, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. What does that mean? If you have 3 quarterbacks, you have -1? I don't know how this is going to work here. So I kind of worry for UCLA here. They don't have the Charbonneau kid. Obviously, he's gone. So there's going to be some, growing pains, I think, on offense. But I think UCLA is a bettable team down the road. Here, I'm a little bit worried about how they're going to have everybody get used to this system as they get past the DTR age, when I felt like Dorian Thompson-Robinson was in Westwood for 8 or 9 years himself.
Yeah, it did feel like that at times. As we got 7:30 Eastern up next, Alabama hosting Middle Tennessee, 52 being the total. Bama laying near 40 points here, Matt. There was a point, a few years ago, Saban, he really didn't like covering these big numbers. So kind of becomes a tough handicap in that sense. But we get MTSU making the trip from Murfreesboro to Tuscaloosa. You like anything in this one?
The great part of having a card of 80 games, Drew, and that includes the extra games, is you can skip this one. Sure. I mean, there's various things to the handicap here. Alabama has 10 starters back, only 5 on offense, only 5 on defense. They've got Texas up next. I mean, that's a large part of their season. It's a large part of Texas's season. Now, last year in week 1 before the Texas game, they beat Utah State 55-0. I was looking up to see how many times they shut out some of these bad opponents that they play in the non-conference, because Middle Tennessee's team total is 5.5. 5.5, which is interesting because obviously you get a touchdown. Even if you miss the extra point, you still go over. Middle Tennessee, I think, has a solid defense. I think that their defense isn't bad, but I don't know if it's not bad for Conference USA or it's not bad for here. I think we could get a slow start. I feel like there's a chance This is like a 3-0, 6-0 type game at the end of the first quarter. And Middle Tennessee won that game at Miami last year. They lost that game to JMU in their opener last year. So, like, those are two of the better offenses they saw. One time they didn't show up, and the other time they kind of did show up down in Miami. There's probably a play here, Drew, and if you're sick enough, you're probably going to play this game, but I'm probably going to pass. I'm certainly not going to play Alabama, asking them to cover the large number. I'm not going to play Middle Tennessee. And ideally, Drew, I feel like in this situation, if you wanted to play the underdog, you need a quarterback and you need an offense that you can trust that will score some points. I
Yeah.
don't do that with Middle Tennessee. I don't like their quarterback play. There's a very good chance they could get shut out, hence the 5.5 team total here. So it's an easy pass to me, but I would not be surprised if at the end of the first quarter, it's like a 6-0, 9-0 type of score.
Next one up is we go from Tuscaloosa to Auburn, Alabama. We get UMass at Auburn, 52 being the total, minus 35. So almost the same type of theme here, but Auburn, new coach, new administration, kind of some unknowns. They did name their starting quarterback, Peyton Thorne, making the transfer from Michigan State. But UMass has a game under their belt, and they went on the road to Las Cruces. And to tell you the truth, Matt, I thought they look they look improved from the past UMass squads that I've seen anyway. They win outright as the dog in a game that I lost on. What are you thinking here? Can UMass stay within 5 touchdowns?
I mean, playing at New Mexico State and playing at Auburn, Drew, is two different things.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, scoring 41 points on New Mexico State and looking good. But now, as you said, there is film. I mean, I think that the difference for UMass is they actually have a quarterback now. Now, granted, his numbers weren't great, but at least he provided something that Brady Olson never provided for UMass. He at least kept people honest. I think, if I remember correctly, UMass's quarterback ran it 17 times, I want to say. That's at least tough to prepare for when you don't have any film. I think Auburn, depending upon how much they want to focus for this game, they could shut out UMass if they want to. The team total here, once again, is a low number, 7.5. It's also the second straight road game for UMass. You're going from UMass to New Mexico State to UMass to Auburn, so the travel's not exactly great, and who knows how UMass flies from game to game. Auburn's got Cal on the road up next, which is a really odd game as well. I don't know, Drew. You're the Auburn guy of the two of us, so I think it's all asking how much Auburn wants to win this by and how much focus they want to give for 4 quarters.
I mean, I think Hugh Freeze would want to win this game and would want to cover. I mean, keep the boosters happy. He's getting paid a ton of money. And to tell you the truth, in the past, remember his stops at Ole Miss, that offense would get rolling. And I remember him being kind of pedal to the metal type coach. I think if he has a shot, he's going to look to run it up and kind of really blow their doors off. But at the same time, I mean, the UMass defense did look decent. If they kind of struggle on offense, I don't know that they'll be able to. Interesting handicap overall. I could see a lot happening though, Matt.
Yeah, and it's another reason why, what you need to do also, if you're one of these people who plays games like this, you have to research the coach. There's some coaches in America. I mean, look, Drew, I've made so much money playing the over in Miami FBS, FCS games, which this game essentially is. It's a really good team versus a really bad team. Miami is one of those teams that scores 70 points every time in these games, and they like to run up the score, no matter who the head coach is. James Madison's another one who, in these situations where they are the way better team, they run the score up, they go over almost by themselves. So you almost have to do a little research on Hugh Freeze and how he does it when it comes to that sort of thing. And you just said it, Drew. It's his first game. He wants to put forth a good effort, too. So there's just a lot of things to consider. And once again, I know this is the Every Game on the Board podcast, and I think we've given people a lot of good information, but you can very easily pass this game and go on to something else that we discussed.
Sure. Great point in researching the coaches, what they like to do, the offensive coordinator, but mainly the head coach. Like Tennessee's another one that comes to mind. They'll run it up on you if they get the chance to do so. So great stuff, as always, from Matt Josephs. Check him out, sportsmemo.com, his radio show, ESPN Richmond, at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter, our 2-hole hitter here. Love having him as part of the podcast. And guys, remember, we're brought to you by Viva Tequila Seltzer, vivatequilaseltzer.com. Our belief is to live long, live well, and live it up. Hashtag Viva Up. Check them out, guys. Viva Tequila Seltzer.com. My favorite drink out there. If you don't like hangovers and like having a good time watching the game, sweating out your bets, Viva Tequila Seltzer.com. Matt, throw it over to you, man. Great stuff as always. Any final thoughts here before we shut it down? Did I forget anything? And do you have a most confident play of the bunch that we talked?
So I'll be interested to see. Obviously, the extra board numbers won't be out until Friday night, but depending on the number, I think Bryant, I think Eastern Kentucky, and I think Northern Iowa will all be live, depending upon the number. You need a healthy margin. Obviously, we're not going to do another podcast before then, but I'm just saying Bryant, who has UNLV, Eastern Kentucky, who travels to Cincinnati, and Northern Iowa, who plays at Iowa State, who Iowa State has not been very good the game before Iowa. The ATS, and plus the gambling scandal and everything that's kind of surrounding that program. There's a lot going on, and Northern Iowa is always very good. So those are three live teams when looking at the FCS, FBS games, a thing I really like to look at. And then, Drew, I guess my most confident pick, I think it's Toledo plus the 9. I mean, I think Toledo, or whatever the number was you gave out, Drew, I think Toledo's live here. They're not going to be intimidated. I think Illinois' offense is going to struggle. I think Illinois' defense is going to take a step back. I think that Toledo's got an offense that's going to score some points on the road here. I think Toledo makes it interesting. Give me the Rockets as my most confident play of this group.
Like it. Matt Joseph's Toledo. We can give you plus 9.5. That's available both in Vegas and offshore. So Toledo plus 9.5. Bryant, Eastern Kentucky, and Northern Iowa looks on the FCS slate. So love bringing that into the podcast as well. I had one for you: Southeast Louisiana versus Mississippi State. I know Southeast Louisiana was like decent last year in FCS. I'm not sure, it's obviously a tough one, but have you looked into that one, Matt?
I did notes on every one of the FCS, FBS games. Southeast Louisiana played 2 FBS teams last year, lost 24-7 at Louisiana, 42-9 at Florida Atlantic. Obviously, their quarterback, Cole Kelly, is gone, so they have to take a step back there. 7 offensive starters back, 6 defensive starters. And the thing you look at, Drew, when you talk about these teams for the FBS level, how do they treat these games? Now, Mississippi State didn't actually play an FCS team last year, so that's rather interesting. They also have Arizona up next. 8 starters back on offense, 4 starters back on defense. Southeast Louisiana could put up some points here. Maybe a look at the over, depending upon what the number is. But obviously, with Mississippi State not playing one of these games last year, a little bit less data, because you don't want to go back to 2021 or 2020 because it's a completely different roster. But yeah, Southeast Louisiana in the past would have been really interesting in this one. I think maybe you look at the over and see potentially both teams putting up some points.
I did not tell Matt I was going to ask him that question about Southeast Louisiana, and look at him. What a professional, guys. Please like the video if you're liking it. Comment below. Let us know what you thought, where you agree, where you disagree, what you're looking to bet. All is welcome. At Mid-Major Matt on Twitter, at Drew Martin Bets. Matt, anything else before we shut this down, man?
No, looking forward to the season. As always, if anybody has any questions, at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter, and certainly appreciate it. Obviously, started the year 0-1. That won't continue. Number 1 on Sports Memo and Wager Talk, up over 150 units the last 3 seasons. So we'll bounce back this week. Certainly, with a lot more games, there's more opportunities to get more victories.
Boom. Guys, we'll be right back with Robbie Vino. He's Matt Josephs, Every Game on the Board podcast. Thanks for tuning in.